Hey everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we're going to be making the cutest bag for spring. This is also the bag that is part of the April Bag Making Bee Club mystery box. Today, we're making the Estrella bag, and this is from Rosa Patterns. This bag, you guys, if you like color, you're going to love this month's box because it is chock full of all my favorite colors. This is a bag that you can make very colorful like I did, or you can make very neutral, very classic, very sleek. You guys know how much I love a scrappy kind of color blocking look, so that's what I opted for this month with the box. We have this beautiful, like, kind of suede feeling material in the middle. We have the same on the sides down here, just a different color, and then we have like this holographic silver on the side, and then you guys, the lining, look at the lining! Look at that rainbow pastel beautiful magic, and then we have that beautiful tag on the inside from Hardwood and Hide. This bag comes together very quick. It is quick to prep, it is quick to sew, it is beginner friendly. I absolutely love it. We are doing the modified strap version, so if you have the pattern and you're like, that doesn't look like the strap in the pattern, there is an additional download you can get, and it is a modified strap, which is what we're going to be doing in the kit today. I love this pattern, guys. Okay, so you can see this is a pretty simple shape here. It is a shoulder bag. If you wanted to make this a crossbody, you definitely could. I don't know if I would suggest it. I think this would kind of hang funny on the waist or on the hip, but it is a beautiful shoulder bag. On the front here, I have my own personal bag tag. My bag tag is not included in the kit. That's just what I like to use, but you can use whatever you'd like if you have your own. The front and the back are pretty much the same. The lining has one slip pocket. It's designed similar to a zipper pocket, but it is a slip pocket because the name of the game with this bag is slouchy. You don't want too much structure, and you'll see that with how we cut the deck of a light and stuff like that. We don't cover everything in deck of a light. We have very specific places for it because you want this to be kind of a slouchy, very form-fitting bag. Alright, so I've got my step stool. I am 5 feet 4 inches tall, a size small or medium depending on the day, and this is how the bag hangs on me. So cute. This is perfect for spring. Perfect for going to those little farmers markets and things like that and grabbing yourself some goodies and some artwork. And I don't know. That's what I look at. I'm going to go to an arts festival with this bag. This is perfect for an arts festival. When this all came together and I showed Gabby, she said it had a very kind of vintage vibe to it, which I agree. It does have a vintage look, which I love. And the nice thing about this pattern in the box this month is that let's say you have a print you really want to use in the center panel here. You don't have to use this pink. Save that for something else. Go ahead and use your fun print for the center. I mean, I only made this version of the bag, and I wish I would have made more because I have a lot of different ideas. The pattern actually just uses one color, and it's amazing. Like, if you just use one color of like faux leather, cork, something like that, just these like stitch lines give it a lot of depth and a lot of definition, and it makes it look so interesting instead of just like a one panel bag. So thank you so much to Rosa Patterns for letting me use your patterns on my channel. You guys know how much I love those. They are such classic bags. Like, all the patterns have a very classic shape to them. I could see my grandmother when she was my age using them, maybe her mother using them, and then my kids will be using them. I love that, and I love how we can use that shape, but then we can, you know, get a little funky with it and use some really fun material, and you can make it your own. If you want it to be that classic bag, make it that classic bag. If you want it to be themey, make it themey. If you want it to be bright, make it bright. I love that. Thank you also to the Bag Making Bee Club monthly mystery box for letting me be a part of it this month. I had so much fun picking out this material, picking out the pattern. It is such a fun thing to do. If you're interested in joining the monthly Bag Making Bee Club mystery box, I'll have a link down below. I believe at this current time there is a waitlist. It is a very popular box. But if you add yourself to that waitlist, when spots become available, you will be notified right away. If you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shoutouts, anything at all, leave them down in the comment section. It's a pretty quick make. I'm going to walk you through every single step of this. I think this is great for beginners, especially because we do have some curves. I know a lot of times beginners are like, oh, I see a curve, I don't want to do it. These are really easy curves though, and you're gonna learn some too. Like, you're gonna learn how to create this shape because this is not a flat panel. It's all flat pieces, but when we sew it together, it does not become a flat panel. You're gonna learn a little bit from that, which I think is great. The box does include rivets this month, so if you have a rivet press, go ahead and use those. If not, you can sew these down on the strap and the bottom over here. However, I do highly encourage you, if you like making bags, to look into rivet presses. I have a link down below. I have a video going over my favorite. I have a kit with cam snaps. It's a whole thing. If you're interested, I'll have links for that all down below. Alrighty guys, let's get started. So for this pattern, you're going to need at least 3/4 of a yard of exterior material. Now, if you're doing the B box with us this month, then we're using a collection of vinyls. We have some of this like holographic silver vinyl, as well as a couple different colors of this stonewash vinyl. None of this vinyl is particularly thick or stiff, which is really important for this bag. The whole design of this bag is that it kind of has like a loose feel to it. You don't want a lot of structure. So this vinyl, while vinyl, is still very flexible. It's very lightweight vinyl, and it all comes together really nice. So we have all of our vinyl here. We're gonna go through all the pieces individually. You're then gonna need a 1/2 yard of lining. Now, a quilt cotton, a woven material is gonna be best here because you want something very lightweight. Again, we don't want too much structure. This, if you got the box, believe it or not, this is a waterproof canvas, which it feels like quilt cotton. I mean, it feels a little bit stiffer maybe than quilt cotton, but it's super drapey. So this is a perfect material for the lining of this bag if you don't want to have to add woven interfacing to anything, which you know I'm a big fan of. So you're going to need at least 1/2 yard of that, and then you're going to want some large scraps of Decoville Light. I already have it attached to the pieces, but you don't need a terribly large amount. I would say like a fat quarter at least. Now, we will be doing the modified version of this bag today with the strap, so we're not going to attach the strap directly into the bag. We're actually going to use some hardware. It's so pretty. I wanted to show you, though, all of the stuff in the B box today, all of the material is wrapped up in these little tubes like this, since I already cut up everything else. This is the last one I have. But every single one of these has a sticker on it which marks which pattern pieces it's for, which I think is so helpful. I was really excited about that. So this one is the strap, so I'll just show you. We have one piece of material. We're just doing a kind of a medium to long size strap today. Not terribly long. You could definitely adjust this if you want to make it a crossbody. You could do that. I think that the structure of the bag, honestly, the style of it, it looks best as a shoulder bag versus a crossbody, but feel free to do it however you'd like. But this is our strap cut. Now let's start with pattern piece A. This is going to be the main side panels of the bag. You're going to have 4 cuts total. 2 cuts like this, and then you're gonna flip this over and do 2 more cuts like that. Make sure you have 2 sets that are mirrored, okay? You don't want 4 like this. You have to flip it over and mirror it. Then we have the Decoville Light cut, so you can see I have the template here. And if we flip these over, you're going to attach them just like this. Now, I don't measure anything. I'm not terribly precise. It needs to be about 1/2 inch from this bottom edge and the side. So if you get confused on where this goes, just make sure you look at the pattern. That's what I did. It's very detailed. It's very easy to figure out where these go, but all 4 of these need it. You do not want to attach Decoville Light to the whole thing. Once again, we don't want a lot of structure with this bag, but this gives it enough so that it's not like a little flabby pancake, you know, like this gives it enough structure where it holds the shape without making it too stiff. Next up, we have pattern pieces B. Once again, you're gonna have 4 cuts, 2 sets that are mirrored. So just like this, 2 like this, 2 like this. If we flip them over, we have our interfacing, our stabilizer right here already attached. Once again, it's about 1/2 inch. Look at the pattern. It'll make it easy to figure out where to put these. When I'm attaching the Decoville Light to the back of vinyl, what I do is I lay it like this. So the vinyl is wrong side up. I put my Decoville Light over it like that. And then I grab a scrap piece of quilt cotton and I cover the Decoville Light, and then I press it with my iron. I don't really like my iron directly touching vinyl, even if it's the back side of vinyl. I just don't like it, so I like to just cover it with a piece of quilt cotton and then press it on like that. It doesn't take very long, it's very quick. For pattern piece C, you're gonna have 2 pieces. Don't forget that this does need to be cut on the fold, so it's not 4 pieces sewn together, it's 2 pieces cut on the fold. So you have 2 pieces just like this on the back side. Each of them will have their associated Decoville Light attached to the bottom, and then if you're gonna be doing a bag tag, make sure you look at the pattern. It'll tell you where to put another piece of Decoville Light just to get a little structure for that metal bag tag if you're using it. So pattern pieces D, E, and F are the stabilizer pieces, which I've already shown you attached. And then we have pattern piece G, which is the lining. You're just gonna have 2 cuts of this. How beautiful is this lining? I hope you guys love it. This is just makes me so happy. It's so colorful. You're gonna have 2 cuts of this. I'm using, again, a waterproof canvas, if you can believe it. I can't wait to buy more of this stuff because this is amazing. It doesn't have any stiffness like a waterproof or water-resistant canvas normally has. It's very, very loosey-goosey. So you're gonna need 2 cuts of that. If you're using quilt cotton, you can go ahead and interface it with woven interfacing. You don't have to. Quilt cotton can be used as a lining without any interfacing. We do that a lot on the channel. But if you like it to have a little bit more beef, just do a lightweight, woven interfacing on it. And then finally, we have 2 rectangle cuts here. You don't have a pattern piece for these. These are going to be for the lining pocket. The lining pocket does not have a zipper, and in the pattern it specifically notes not to do a zipper because it would add, again, too much structure. So this is like a slip pocket, but it's kind of built like a zipper pocket. All right, here are the other things in the kit. You're gonna have a set of rivets. We are using rivets today. You will need a rivet setting tool in order to use them. You do have the option of sewing instead of rivets, but again, this box is for more of a confident beginner, intermediate sewing level. If you're interested in a rivet press, I have a video down below that goes over my rivet press and all the dies and everything like that. I love it. So rivets today, and then we have this beautiful bag tag from Heartwood and Hide. It says, "You are worthy." I'm gonna be putting this on the lining today. I think it's a nice little pop message on the inside. And then we're gonna have a magnetic snap, and then 2 1-inch rectangle rings and 2 1-inch strap ends, as well as some screws to go with those strap ends. This just kind of makes the strap look fancy. All right, here's all the other stuff. Here is my rivet press. If you're interested in something like that, again, link down below. I have a metal bag tag that I'll be using. This is a custom made metal bag tag. I also have a link for how I had these made down below. It is a bit of a process. You do have to buy a lot of them. It is done through a manufacturer in China. So it's a whole process, but I have my contact information, who I worked with, everything like that. It's linked down below. For the thread today, for the top thread, I'll be using a Tex 45 weight thread. I love this like pastel rainbow color. I think that goes really well with the colors today. And then I have a Gutermann thread for the bobbin. And then I'm going to be using a Schmetz 8012 Microtex needle. Double-sided tape is always helpful. We don't need it as much in this one because we don't have a zipper, but it's always good to have on hand. I have a 1-inch by 6-inch ruler, a lighter to help clean up any little threads, a turning tool, my stiletto, which is my third hand at the sewing machine. I can get nice and close to the needle without having to worry about poking my fingers. And then I have a seam ripper and stiletto here as well. I love these seam rippers. They're so beautiful. I get them off of Etsy. Again, links for these will be down below. My 3 go-to marking tools are a silver ink marking tool, which is great for vinyl, a air erasing marking tool, and then a heat erasing marking tool, and of course, lots and lots of clips. So I still need to attach some little 1-inch by 1-inch squares of Decoville Light to my lining for the magnetic snap, so I can show you how to do that. So I have my lining pieces here, and now what I'm going to do is fold it in half so that I can find the midpoint on the top curved edge right here. I'm just gonna make a little snip with my scissors to find that midpoint. And then we're gonna measure 1 inch down from that center midpoint. So I'm just gonna take my little ruler here and line it up with the top edge, measure 1 inch down. And then I'm gonna grab my little Decoville Light piece and just center it. So the top of it is 1 inch down, just like that. And then if you'd like, you can grab some quilt cotton here to cover that and then press it down. There we go. Now I have a little piece of stabilizer here, so when I install my magnetic snap, it's already there. I don't have to worry about that. I'm going to repeat that with the other lining panel. All right, so let's start by adding these magnetic snaps to our lining. Flip your lining over. If you're adding magnetic snaps, you don't have to add the snaps. You can just leave it, but it's nice with it. So we're going to look at the top edge where we have our Decoville Light. We're going to measure down 1.5 inches. And that should pretty much be in the center of your little square here, but make sure you measure just in case. I know sometimes I eyeball these little Decoville Light pieces, and so they're a little bit bigger or smaller. So you do want to measure, make sure it's centered, and mark a dot 1.5 inches down, centered on the back of your lining. Then grab one of your washers and center your washer over that little dot and mark in the vertical lines for the prongs. Grab yourself a seam ripper and gently, slowly rip right along those marks. It's better if you are on the small side. Don't over rip. Don't rip past the marks. It's always better for them to be a little bit tight rather than too loose. So then you can take one of your magnetic snaps and insert it from the right side, right? You want the snap on the right side. So find those slits and put those prongs in there. Look how cute that is. I just love these colors. These colors are so good for spring. And then on the back, we're going to grab our washer and we're going to cover the back, putting the washer through the prongs, and then spread them open or closed, whichever one you prefer. And I always like to grab some sort of scrap something. It can be fusible fleece, it can be woven interfacing, Decoville Light, whatever you have. Grab that, make sure it will cover the prongs, and grab some glue. You could also press this on, but I find that glue just, it works better. Pressing these small pieces on the metal is always a little tricky. So I'm just gonna glue it over the prongs because I don't want these prongs to be rubbing against my exterior piece. There we go. And that way this will dry pretty quickly. All right, there we go. So go ahead and repeat that. Do the exact same thing on the other lining piece with the opposite magnetic snap. Make sure you do have a female and male end, okay? All right, once you have the magnetic snaps installed, now we're going to attach the pocket. So pick one of these to be the pocket panel. And if you haven't already, you're going to want to mark the midpoint along the bottom edge of your main lining panel. Then grab your zipper pocket panel, and you're going to want to mark a midpoint. You can mark it on the bottom edge. So the side of your pocket panel is the longer edge. The top and the bottom are the shorter edges. And you're going to want to take your zipper pocket panel and lay it right side down. So it's right sides together with the lining. And then you're going to want to measure 1.5 inches up from this bottom midpoint edge and match up the midpoint marks with this pocket panel and the bottom here. So it's 1.5 inches centered. The longer edge is on the side, just like that. I have tape here. I know I keep showing you guys stuff that I didn't show you in the beginning of the video. I apologize, but I like to tape this in place because this stuff is slippery. It'll move around. I won't be able to keep it together between here and the sewing machine. So I'm going to tape it. So once you have this taped in place, you're going to measure 1 inch down from the top edge, draw a horizontal line, and then measure 1/2 inch below that and draw a horizontal line, and then measure in 1 inch from each side and draw a vertical line. So we have a nice little rectangle right here in the center. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch right along this inner rectangle. So not the full horizontal lines, just this right here on the inside, this inner rectangle, making sure you get the needle in those corners, stitch all the way around. So once you have that little rectangle sewn, you're going to draw a midpoint line. So 1/4 inch up or down from either one of the horizontal lines, just centered right along this box. And then you're going to take your marking tool and go into the corners and draw a diagonal line from the corner down to that midpoint line. So it can be as close or as far as you want. I like to make it a little bit farther, maybe like 3/8 inch from the vertical short edges over here. I find that's a little bit easier to work with if it's a bigger triangle. Now I'm going to grab my seam ripper and I'm going to rip right along that middle line between both layers, my pocket and my main lining panel, just a little bit so that I can then get my scissors in there. And I'm going to cut along that center line until I get to the tip of my triangle. And then I'm just going to cut along the diagonal down towards those corners. And I'm cutting as close as I can to my stitching without cutting the stitching. So nice and close. So I'm going to do this for the other side as well. All right, so this part is a little finicky with this material. If you have tape, go ahead and remove it. Be careful when you're pulling it off because the material is lightweight enough that it does fray. So now we're going to push this rectangle through that hole that we just cut. Let's flip it over to the back. And what we want to do is pull this entire rectangle out so that it's wrong sides together with the lining, and then we're going to flatten it out. Which is a little tricky because this material is so loosey-goosey. It's kind of hard to keep it in that shape. So we might also have to use some tape, but let's just start like this. I like to start with just like one corner. This is the only corner I'm working on right now is right here. I'm going to grab my iron and just press into that corner and let it cool. Maybe as it cools, it'll stay like I want it to. It's pretty good for the most part. So now I'm just going to continue doing that along this top straight edge here. Just going to press it with my fingers the way I want it to look in the end. And then I'm going to run the iron over it for just a couple seconds. And then as it cools, I just kind of keep pressing it with my fingers. And that way it'll stay the way I want it to. Because when it gets hot, it gets super loosey and it will just do its own thing. So as it cools, you want to tell it where to go. So now I'm going to go to the other corner up here and press that down. All right, so that's holding pretty well. So now I'm going to repeat that with this bottom edge here. And I'm always kind of rolling the material. The nice thing about using the same fabric for this rectangle as well as your lining is that if some of it's kind of rolled out, you're not gonna notice the difference. On the right side of the material, you won't notice that some of the lining is peeking through for the pocket because it's the same stuff. Again, remember, every time you heat it up, it's just gonna do its own thing. So you gotta tell it how you want it to stay when it's cooled off. There we go. So now I'm gonna flip this over and look at the right side. I'll try to flatten everything out as much as I can. All right, and I'm gonna give it a little press from the front as well. And once again, as it cools, I'll just do this. You can also grab a ruler and just stick a ruler on top of it while it cools, and it'll cool very flat. All right, now that it's nice and flat and you're happy with it, what we're gonna do is we're gonna top stitch around all 4 edges of this little opening at 1/8 inch seam allowance. And there we go. Now we have that little pocket open. This is just like a little slip pocket. Tricks you. It looks like a zipper pocket, but it's not. Okay, now let's finish up the pocket by grabbing your remaining lining pocket piece and laying it right side down against the lining piece you've already sewn on. And now let's grab some clips and let's clip along the sides and the top. But you don't have to clip along the bottom because we don't want to sew that. We're gonna leave that open. Okay, so to sew this, we're gonna flip this right side up. We're gonna go to the sewing machine and you're gonna pull back the lining main panel. And you're gonna sew along the side, the top, and the other side at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Do not sew at the bottom, but make sure you do backstitch really well at the bottom here. All right, this lining pocket is sewn on, but before I move on, I do want to add my little adorable "You Are Worthy" tag. So what I'm gonna do is flip up this rectangular pocket out of the way, just like that. Because I like the tag to go right beneath it. So whenever I look in there and I reach for a pen, I get this sweet little reminder. So I'm gonna grab some double-sided tape to help me attach this. I'm just gonna put a little piece of tape on the back. And then you can grab a ruler to find the exact midpoint, but I'm just gonna use my eyeballs. And I'm putting it about 1 inch below the bottom edge of this pocket here. There we go. And now I'm gonna top stitch along all 4 edges of this at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now that that's on there, grab your remaining lining panel and let's lay these right sides together. I like to snap them together. There we go. And they should line up pretty perfectly. So now what we want to do is we want to clip along the sides and most of the bottom. So we're not going to be sewing along this inner curve here, just the outside edges. Okay, so I have the sides clipped, and now I'm going to leave most of the bottom open. I am going to sew a little bit on the bottom, but I'm going to leave most of it open. So I'm just marking little marks over here. So now we're going to start at the top and we're going to sew down at a 3/8 inch seam allowance until we get to that first mark. Leave this bottom open and then sew up the other side at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at this opening over here. Also backstitch at the top. So once you have this sewn, if you have pinking shears, you can use those to cut the edges here. I don't, so I'm just gonna cut the seam allowance in half all the way down. And then once I get down here to the bottom where I started and stopped sewing, I'm not gonna trim the seam allowance there. Once I get here, I just cut to my stitches and then I'll just cut vertically into that scrap like that. I'll do the same thing over here. So the open edge over here, we don't mess with that seam at all. We just leave it alone. It's gonna make it easier when we have to close the bag in the end if that bit of fabric is longer. All right, and if you have some pretty sharp curves, I mean, it really depends on your material. I cut my seam pretty skinny, so I don't really need to do this, but if you have some spots where there's sharper curves and the seam's still, you know, 1/4 of an inch or so, you can snip into it. Don't cut the stitches, but you can snip little vertical snips. Again, it's kind of mimicking what a pinking shears would do. All right, your lining is done, so go ahead and set that to the side. So now let's build these outer panels. So you can see I have my 2 big side panels here, and then I have my 2 bottom side panels. I know I can't, I'll turn it this way so you can see it better. All right, so the bag is like this. So what we're gonna do, start with this side over here, is we're going to line them up just like this, how it's gonna be in the end, and we're gonna flip them right sides together. So everything should line up perfectly. You have these little angled notches over here. It should all line up perfectly. Remember, these are A and B pieces and they're right sides together. Repeat that with the other panel like that. So lay it out first so that you know this is how it's supposed to be, and then flip it right sides together. All right, so I have the right side of the bag done. So now I'm gonna repeat that with the left side. So grabbing the left panels, lay it out, and then flip it right sides together. And repeat that with your last 2 panels. Okay, so I have all 4 units ready to go. Now we're going to sew along these clipped edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. So once these are sewn together, what you want to do is press that seam allowance open. Now, if you're using material like us, pressing with an iron is not really an option. So you can press it with your fingers. There are also some like seam rollers you can use. What I do honestly is I just press it open with my fingers at the machine, and I just keep an eye on it, so I'll continuously lift this up as I'm top stitching. So what we're going to do is we're going to top stitch on the left and the right of the seam, top stitching these seams flat. So we're going to go ahead and do that at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance for all 4 of these panels. How pretty do those look? I love this color combination so much. It's so pretty. Okay, so now let's work on one panel at a time. So grab a left and right part of your main panel. And now we're going to grab one of our C panels, which is the center. And if you'll notice, this doesn't line up like straight. It's not supposed to. This is what gives it that nice little chunky, scrunchy look. I love it. Okay, so let's start with one side. Let's start with the left side over here. So we're going to flip the left side, right sides together with this center panel. And you're going to have to kind of force it to do what you want it to do. So I'm going to start here on the right corner, match up those top corners and clip together. And then go down here on the bottom and match up the bottom corners and clip together. And now, curving this as we need to, so you might have to kind of lift it up, move it around. We're going to clip together these panels. They do not lay flat when we do this. They're not supposed to. It's just a real slight curve, real slight, like a baby curve. Nothing challenging. You just have to move it where it needs to go. All right, once you have that clipped together, you can see it's kind of ripply. Again, it's supposed to be. Let's sew this at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Once you have these sewn together, you're going to open this up and you want to press the seam open on the back. Remember, this is not going to lie flat. But just like we did on these side panels over here, we're going to press this open with our fingers and we're going to top stitch along the left and the right edges. So as I'm top stitching, because this does not lay flat, I give it kind of like a bowl feel. And the big thing is just focus on the inch that you're working on. Just focus on the bit at hand and the little inch in front of that, and slowly top stitch on the left and right sides, making sure you're pushing these seams open. I always like to start on the stone wash sides when I do the top stitching because I find this holographic one is a little bit sticky, but if I start on this side, I don't get the stick versus if I start on the holographic side. All right, so you see we sew it like this, but in the end it's gonna pop out like that, and it gives it that beautiful shape. So I'm gonna repeat that with the right side. I'll walk you through it again. So again, kind of flattening this out, lay them right sides together. Once again, match up the top corners and the bottom corners, and then just manipulate the material to get it where you need it. You want the raw edges matching up. All right, now let's sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, backstitch at the beginning and the end. All right, once those are sewn, once again, we're gonna flip it out, and you wanna finger press the seam right side open. And again, I just do it at the machine, and we're gonna top stitch along both sides at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And there you go. As you see, when both of them are on there, it has this nice bubble effect. So cute. So now I'm gonna repeat that with the other main panel. Okay, so once you have these both done, if you still need to add your middle bag tag, make sure you go ahead and do that. So I'm going to just center this. So I went ahead and marked the center of my little deck of a light piece here, and then I used my washer to mark placement for the slits. And then I can use my seam ripper, once again, to make very small cuts through that deck of a light and through that exterior material. And then I can insert the prongs into those slits from the right side, flip it over, and attach the washers And spread open those prongs. And now from the front, you can kind of get it straight. That looks good. Okay, and then just like I did before, I'm gonna take a scrap piece of Deco Light and just glue this over the back of those metal prongs. All right, so now both of our panels are ready to go. We're going to flip them right sides together. And just kind of mush them around like you need to. And we're gonna clip along the entire outer edge from the top all the way down to the bottom. Make sure you're matching up the seams. So once you have the exterior all clipped along the sides, we're going to stitch along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. We're not sewing the very tops or the inner circle, just all of the rest of it. And make sure you backstitch up here at the top. Okay, so once you have it all sewn together, I'm once again just going to trim the seam allowance in half. If you have pinking shears, then use those. I should probably get some at some point. And then on any of these like tighter curves, you can just gently cut little notches. I mean, just so gently. Honestly, I don't even know if it does anything, but you don't want to accidentally cut your thread, and then when you turn the bag out, you have a hole. That's miserable. So I'm very careful with this. All right, now let's turn this right side out and get a nice look at what your bag is. So go ahead and use your fingers to press out those seams. If you feel like some of your curves are really stiff and kind of bulky looking, you can go back in with your scissors and shave off the seam allowance a little bit or put some more little slits in there. Isn't that cool? I love how this looks. It looks so cool. So now grab your exterior and your lining, and you're going to insert your exterior into your lining right sides together. So exterior is right side out, lining's right side in. Decide which side. I like to have the little pocket here go against the back panel. So this is my back panel over here. So I'm going to make sure that the back panel is against right sides together, the side with the pocket, as I insert this in there. Okay, and since we're doing a modified version of this, we're not going to be sewing the strap in. We're going to be adding the strap later, so we'll make the strap later. For right now, though, what I want to do is just really shove this in the lining, and I'm going to go up here to the top and clip these right sides together, matching up the seams. You can press the seams open if you'd like, or just twist them in opposite directions. I always find my lining panel is like a little bit wider than my exterior panel, which is fine. So I'm going to start there, and then I'm going to do the other side as well. Just at the very top here, matching up those seams. And if you haven't already marked the midpoint on the top of the exterior and lining panels, go ahead and do that. You don't need to undo anything to do that. You can just kind of find the panels, fold them in half, and mark the midpoint on the top edges. Okay, I already have it on my linings. So now what I like to do is match up the midpoints. I just find it's easier. The more marks we can match up, the easier it is. So let's match up these midpoints on the lining and the exterior. Now you gotta really shove that bag in there. And then once you have the midpoints marked, pull this down and just clip all the way up to the top. All right, once you have one side clipped, go ahead and repeat that for the other side. You gotta really kind of tug on the lining. Don't be gentle. We're not worried about what's going on down here. We just wanna get the raw edges lined up as much as possible. All right, so now we're going to sew along the top and the inner edges on both sides of this at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, just all the way around. Since we are using 1-inch hardware, we do need to adjust the seam allowance. So on most of this, it's gonna be 3/8 of an inch, but up here, down to about where it starts to curve out, sew it at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. So up here on the straight edge, it can be 3/8 of an inch. And then down here, until it starts to bow out, do a 5/8 inch seam allowance, because it needs to be bigger so it'll fit the smaller 1-inch rectangle ring. there we go. So now, just like before, I'm just gonna trim the seam allowance down in half, maybe a little bit less than half up here where the seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch. I'm just gonna go around making sure I caught the lining everywhere. All right, and if you're not using pinking shears, you might wanna go, especially around these straps over here, just clip little slits into the seam, and where it's got a sharper corner on the inner bit here. You just wanna make sure everything curves the way we want it to curve in the end. Now we're gonna turn this bag right side out carefully. So pull it through the hole in the lining. Now we need to poke out these top straps, which is where that turning tool comes in really handy because it's pretty tight. So I always like to take the blunt end and start with that and just very gently work out this handle. And once I've got most of it turned out, I'll use the sharper edge carefully to really get those corners out. There we go. All right, do the same thing with the other side. Alrighty, so once you've got those edges poked out, we're gonna put the lining back in the bag, and now we wanna top stitch along the entire edge. So this just takes some time. I like to just roll it with my fingers and then add clips around the entire top edge that we just sewed. So that way I can push that lining back so it's not peeking out through the front. I will tell you it's a little bulky up here, so you want to be careful when you're sewing up there. All right, so once you have the entire top edge all clipped and rolled out the way you want it, let's take this to the sewing machine and top stitch along this. I like to take the bed off my sewing machine because I do like to top stitch it with the exterior side up. This isn't a big enough bag where you probably don't need to take the bed off. You could still top stitch this with the bed on the sewing machine. It's just a little bit easier to like have this kind of hanging off the side. But we're gonna go around the whole edge, 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Alrighty, how cute is that looking? I love this bag. I love this bag so much. Okay, so let's do let's finish up the bag and then we'll do the strap. So what you want to do is open up this pocket here. Remember, we did not sew the bottom of that, so you're going to open up that, pull the pocket out, open up that hole, and then reach in and grab the bottom of your lining panels. I'm having a hard time with the words today. Anyways, pull out those lining panels. There you go. So remember, we still have that hole in the lining panel as well. We're going to sew that up first. So if you need to, grab some clips, but you should be good here because it's just nice and flat. So we have stitches over here, and then this opening. We're just going to stitch right along this edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance from stitch to stitch, just closing the hole. Once that's sewn, just tuck that lining back into the bag. And now we can close the hole in the pocket. So all you have to do is just put your fingers in here and you can just flip down the raw edges by about 1/2 of an inch or so. I don't measure it. I just flip it down. And then line it up as best you can. No one's going to be looking to see if this is perfectly square or anything. You just want to get those raw edges tucked in there. And then use clips to clip along the top here. All right, and now we're just going to top stitch along this clipped edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once that's closed up, just push that pocket back in the slip opening. There we go. Get it all nice. Okay, there we go. Now the bag part is done. Let's work on our handle. So remember, you can make this handle as long as you want. This is going to be a shoulder bag, so it's not terribly long, but if you want to make it a crossbody, you could. If you want to make it shorter, you can. There's lots of different length options. On the back side, I drew a midpoint line going right along the center, and now I'm going to fold the long edges, wrong sides together, up to meet that midpoint line. And I'm just using clips here. You could also use tape if you'd like, but this isn't terribly long. It won't take me that long to use clips. And then I'll fold the other raw edge down as well to meet that middle line. And then flip this all in half so those raw edges are tucked in to this edge over here, and we don't have any raw edges on the long sides. All right, so once that's all clipped, we can top stitch on both the long edges. You can top stitch the short edges as well, but those will be covered with the little strap end. We're gonna do this at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you find that like maybe your presser foot is sticking to this a little bit, you can always increase your stitch length. So I'm actually gonna be working at like a 4mm stitch length with this. Again, utilize tape on your presser foot. Anything, if you find that this is sticking in any way, just treat it like you would treat a sticky vinyl. All right, let's finish up this bag. So we have our rectangle rings, our strap ends, our rivets, everything we need. First, let's do the rectangle rings. So what you're gonna do is just take one of your rectangle rings and thread it over the top of your bag, and then let this fold down, lining sides together, just like that. You can grab a ruler. You want this to overhang about 1 1/4 of an inch. There we go. Now use some clips to hold it in place. And we're gonna use 2 rivets here to hold this down. So you can, I like to look from the back side because I feel like that's where I really need to make sure everything catches. So you can measure about 5/8 of an inch from the folded edge, or just eyeball this. You know me, I have a tendency to just eyeball things. There we go. So I made 2 dots, one on each side of the seam. Now I'm gonna grab a hole punch. And I have a hole punch die and a hole punch rivet press. I just like this handheld one for some reason. It's just quick and easy. So I'm just gonna go over here and punch out those holes. Once I have those punched, I'm gonna grab my rivets. I can just snap these in place. Nice thing about rivets is that they do just snap together, so you don't have to press them immediately. You can kind of leave them there for a little bit and they'll hold everything together. And there we go, that's what it looks like on this side. So do the same thing with the other little strap top here. Alrighty, so we have our rivets temporarily set. We haven't set them properly yet, but they're holding on these little 1-inch rectangle rings. It's hard to show you at this angle. They look cute. There we go. So now grab your strap and let's install these strap ends. If you have a top side and a bottom side, right side, wrong side, think about that now, because we're pretty much just going to slide these strap ends right over the bottom edge. Sometimes it's a little bit of a tight fit, so you got to really wiggle it on there. And you can add some glue to the ends of these straps if you'd like. Because mine is such a tight fit, I really don't think I need the glue. But there we go. So make sure that both of these strap ends are right side up. They're not upside down. Now let's flip this over. You're gonna need some teeny tiny screwdrivers for your teeny tiny screws. Don't lose these screws. It is a nightmare trying to find these. If they fall into the carpet, no good. So I'm gonna take my stiletto, and on the back side of my strap ends, I have these little holes. I'm just gonna poke into those holes with my stiletto. Kind of creates like a little hole that's waiting for these little screws. And then grab a teeny tiny screwdriver. Nice thing about these screwdrivers is that they are magnetic, so it just holds it in place for me while I insert these in and twist them in. There we go. And if you'd like, you can add some glue to these holes before you put the screws in, but I think I'll be okay without it. So install all 4 screws into the 2 strap ends. Alrighty, so we have the strap ends in place. Now we can use the measurements that the pattern gives. So let's measure 3/4 of an inch from the end of the handle and just mark a dot there. There we go. And then measure 2 1/4 inch from that same end and mark a dot on the center of your strap there. So these are the 2 holes we're gonna punch for the rivet. So grab your hole punch, just punch out those holes. There we go. So do the same thing on the other side of your strap. Now grab your bag and you should have 2 rivets left. Thread your strap so that it's the wrong side of the strap end up, just like this. You might have to kind of twist it into that rectangle ring and then fold it over. So the folded over edge should be on the inside of the strap like this. See how it's tucked underneath? Grab one of your rivets, push it through the hole nearest the strap end, and then push it through the other hole. There we go. And this is pretty thick. There we go. So then put the other end of the rivet on there. Perfect. And now let's do the same thing. So you're going to take your strap and just keep it straight, wrap it around so that it goes in from the outside into the center of the bag. get it through that rectangle ring, and then fold it up and use those 2 holes to line up the strap and insert your rivet. Now that we have all the rivets in there, we just have to set them. So just use your rivet press of choice and set all these rivets. And there you go, the bag is done. Isn't that a fun shape? And I feel like it comes together pretty easily, pretty quickly. I love this little pop of the tag inside. Such a cute, cute bag. And the way it hangs on the body is really nice. Alrighty guys, what did you think? How did you like making it? Let me know. Down in the comments, let me know how you like doing it. I love it. I want to try this with so many different materials. I want to try it with some canvas. I want to try it with some wax canvas. I think that would be really cool. I want to try it with some quilt cotton. I have so many prints over here that I want to try it out with. I love this bag so much, and I actually do want to make just a completely neutral one because I think my mom, like the one in the pattern, that beautiful yellow bag, I think my mom would love that. I love that the closure for the top of this is a magnetic snap. It is completely optional. I'll show you what it looks like when it's snapped shut. There you go. It just kind of pinches the top, but if you're not interested in doing the magnetic snap, then just leave it off. I am just loving this lining material. I love that it feels like a quilt cotton, but it's not. It does fray a bit, so you do have to think about that, but you still don't have to interface it. You just have to be a little gentle with it, but it does not require any woven interfacing to work. So if you've already made this bag and you have some tips or tricks or some little hacks to make it even cooler, leave them down in the comment section below. I want to read all about it. If you're going to make this bag and you post it on social media, please make sure you tag me. I'm at OklaRoots. Also make sure you're tagging the Bee Box if you're using the Bee Box or if you're just interested in joining the Bee Box. And also tag Rosa Patterns. I know that every time I get on social media, every single day, I see a new bag made with an Rosa pattern. And like every single one of her patterns is on my list. So if there's a pattern specifically you want to see on the channel from Rosa, make sure you leave a comment down below and I will add it. I'll try to bump it up towards the top of the list. I hope you're having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.